right. Hey, everybody. Today we have quite the guest. She is the Director of Recovery Services at the Mass Council on Gaming and Health, where she covers a range of initiatives for individuals at risk, struggling with, and recovering from gambling disorder. She is someone with lived experience, having been 33 years sober and 17 years since her last bet. I am so excited to have her here. Please welcome to the Modern Meeting, Jody Nealley. Jody,
Hey, hey,
welcome.
Adam. Good to be here. Thank you for getting up early for
Oh,
me.
I know everyone can hear it right now. They're like, why does his voice sound like that? It's because I just woke up. But no, just so happy to have you. I mean, I've heard a lot of stories, and I know people hear me say this on the Modern Meeting, and this story is this, but this story, I mean, in preparation for this, I read some articles about you, and I guess my first question before we get into it,
Hmm,
I found an article from 2015
hmm.
where you told your story.
And the wager. Yeah. Yeah.
And so talk about what was it like leading up to that to make that decision? I mean, talk about being ahead of the curve. Nobody was telling their gambling story 10 years ago. What was that like for you? And then how did you make the decision to do it? And then what was the aftermath like? What was the response like?
Well, it was a long time ago. Well, I was, so when I joined the Mass Council on Compulsive Gambling, as it was known in 2012, when I started working there, we're now the Mass Council on Gaming and Health. I was 4 years in free of a bet, many years sober, but it really was the gambling, I always say, that took me down. And I had spoken at, I don't know, lots and lots of GA meetings. And so you sort of, when you go to GA meetings a lot, you are often the speaker or the chair of the meeting, and you tell your story. I mean, you don't tell it for 20 minutes, but and so you sort of get used to telling it. And then when I had the good fortune of being hired by the Mass Council, um, and when we go back into my backstory, you'll know why that was such an amazing thing that happened to me, and I was so grateful for it. I started learning about gambling I always say that I knew about gambling from the inside, but when I started working in the field of problematic gambling, I learned it from the outside. And
Mm,
I learned how important it was to get your story out there. It was a little scary. Um, I never Google myself. I still don't. I don't even want to see what is out there, uh, for what reasons will be made obvious. But it was a good publication, and it was respected in the community. And I knew it wasn't going to be like widely distributed to the whole wide world. And it was good to write it down. So yeah, there was some trepidation, but I also thought it was important for me to do.
totally. I mean, and like I said, just the courage to do that. I mean, in
Yeah.
2015, you must have been just a handful of people that had gone public with a story like that, you know?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. So you mentioned your backstory. Yeah, let's go back to the beginning. So as I mentioned, you're 33 years sober. So
Mhm.
I'm assuming that your story starts, struggling with alcohol. So tell us about that.
Yeah, it does pretty much start there. Um, I always say that I have an addictive personality, however people want to interpret that. I quit. I often start my story with when I was 25 and I quit a 3-pack a day smoking habit. You know, and I was really proud of myself because I stopped when I was 25. There were no adverse effects. I'm like, yay, me. But I was drinking in my 20s. My dad had been an alcoholic, though he got sober when I was 10, and he and mom went to AA and Al Anon every Sunday and Tuesday for decades. So I had a really good role model, but sometimes genetics are there. And then in 1992, I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. That was it. So I quit drinking. It wasn't easy, but when I make up my mind to do something, just like with smoking, I usually don't backslide. And I made what probably was a big mistake in that I didn't go to AA. I didn't go to counseling, even though I had this great role model from my parents. I don't know, at that point, maybe I was still just too pissed at having to stop drinking, and everybody in AA seemed like they were sort of complaining and whining. I'm like, I don't want to be around negative energy. I just want to stop. So I just did the whole bootstrap thing. Now, in retrospect, and when I talk to folks at the peer recovery centers in Massachusetts, which is part of my job, to go around to peer recovery support centers and talk to people, mostly in the peer recovery centers are in recovery from substance use, drugs, or drinking. I say that I didn't go into recovery. I went into abstinence, and how big a difference there is between abstinence. And I wasn't white knuckling it. Like, I wasn't like, I want to drink, I want to drink. I wasn't really white knuckling, but I just stopped drinking, and I didn't do any work. I didn't, I didn't try to find out why I was doing all that. Right.
But how do you think you had the strength to just stop like that? I mean, is that common for people to, I mean, I know a couple people in my life that just stopped, but then when I have conversations with them, we get to the conclusion that, they actually didn't have the disease. They were just a really like problem drinker. Would you categorize yourself as that, or did you think you were an alcoholic?
No, I admitted to myself I was an alcoholic. I
Okay.
mean, it was quite obvious to me. I had done the classic alcoholic thing. Was I had stopped drinking for a year. And I said, okay, I'm going to stop drinking for a year. I didn't drink for a year. And then I was at some conference, and I had started drinking again. And the conference had a little cocktail party in the outside foyer. And then everybody was going into the ballroom. What was I doing? Finishing people's glasses of the
Oof.
wine in their glasses.
Yeah, that's
And I'm like, it's okay. So that's it.
yeah.
I can't fool myself. So that was my moment, when I knew I couldn't drink anymore. Um,
And,
and
and,
so yeah,
and so for the entire, so you never ended up going to AA.
I think I went to a couple meetings, but like I said, it just didn't resonate with me at all.
And so what did you do besides sheer willpower to stop? Like, was there anything that you did, or you woke up every day and you're like, nope, not doing it?
Nope. I'm like, nope. I'm like, yay, me. I'm so proud of myself. Just like with smoking, I quit smoking. I quit smoking. I quit drinking. I quit drinking. Like quitting smoking when I was 25 and not smoking again sort of gave me, I guess, I'm like, if I could do it at 25, I can quit smoking. I hate to quit smoking. I love smoking. I hate to quit drinking. I loved drinking, but I got to do this. I was 37 years old. And it's like, let's move on.
Right.
So,
So you're so you're
and then things started happening really well for me, which is why I sort of took my mind off stuff.
okay. So yeah. So basically, doing the math. So you're in your late 30s, and
Yeah.
then all your 40s, you're thriving.
My 40s were amazing. Like
Yeah.
really my best decade, I would say. Well, 60s were pretty good. I'm 70
Yeah.
now. 60s were pretty good. 50s were really hard, but the 40s were great. And as you'll hear me say in other stories, I say in my 40s that I had what I call the big three. You love where you live, you love who you're with, and you love what you do. I
Mm.
had the job of my dreams. I was married to a woman I was very much in love with, had a house in the burbs. We had a kid. I wasn't drinking. I was a late bloomer, but at 40-ish, in my 40s, I had it all. But I wasn't in true recovery.
Mm.
So,
So
but I
I
didn't know
yeah. So I read when I was reading all of your articles. You mentioned you didn't mention the big three, but you said like things were going so great, but then you just had this. I can't remember how you worded it, but like this feeling of emptiness, right?
that. Hmm.
Like, and you were just searching. So like, explain that more as far as like when did things start? Even though everything's going great, talk about that feeling and what inevitably led you to gambling.
Well, when I said when I stopped drinking that I went into abstinence, and that I didn't do the work. The amazing thing about recovery, that people are in recovery, is we have truly looked inward. I always said that I had this, I visualize it as this black hole in me, and that I was just sucking in all this thing, buying, drinking, smoking, risk taking to try to fill this hole. Well, it was a black hole. I couldn't fill it. Black holes can't be filled. When I was able to quit gambling and go in recovery, that's when I realized I had to fill it with gratitude, with spirituality, with things that weren't tangible. But in my 40s, I didn't know all that. I just knew that I remember saying in 2005, so I was 50. This was right on the verge of me falling off the cliff. I remember talking to a colleague and said, I've lost my joy. Very
That's
clearly.
what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I said I had lost my joy. And I think, I had it all, but with all, be careful what you wish for, comes stress, anxiety, a lot of stuff. I was the main breadwinner. And, there was just a lot going on. But really, I attribute it. I don't blame anybody else. I really put it back to me not going to AA when I quit drinking, or some other form, some other self-help program. There weren't as many around in 1992, but, some other more therapy, something that would have made me realize this black hole really was just a black hole and could never be filled by things or substances. If I had done that, well, I wouldn't be here. But so in my 40s, I had all this stuff, going on. And do you want me to merge into the tipping point?
Oh yeah. I want to know, what was your relationship with gambling throughout your life until you started gambling compulsively?
Okay. I had gambled twice, I think 4 times prior to 2005.
So crazy.
I will tell this story.
You guys that start late in life, it's just crazy.
Classic women, right? Anybody out there do the research? Late onset women gambling. The joke about the women is that, we fall into gambling faster, but being the overachievers that we are, we get into recovery faster too. So,
all right, okay.
But I will tell you the story that I told once in an article. I think it was an article, the About Campus article, about some friends and I, 1978. So I'm 23. Some friends and I from college are traveling cross country, and we stopped at Las Vegas at midnight to get the 99-cent breakfast because we were driving on to the Grand Canyon by sunrise. And I'm sitting at the nickel slot machine. That was the first time I'd ever been to a casino. I had no money. I never had any money. I was terrible with money management. And I maybe had $1 and I went through whatever. And the friend who I was with came over and I said, can you lend me some money? She goes, oh no, you like this way too fast. We're out of here.
Wow.
So already my dopamine was spiking, and
right.
I'd forgotten all about that for years. But I probably could have fallen into it earlier. I didn't hang around with people who were gambling. Casinos weren't a thing. I was a drinker. I wasn't a gambler.
Yeah. So when did you make that first casino trip or first bet where things felt different?
Well, anybody who reads my story say I sort of start my slide in about March of 2005. I was at a conference in Reno, professional development conference, and we do so many things unconsciously. Like already, I've been feeling that lack of joy, and I brought some money with me because all the hotels are casinos. So we're staying in a hotel. It was a casino, and I was really excited because the few times I had gamble, I liked it. Mm-hmm. And so between seeing friends from all over the country and doing ed sessions and doing all the professional development stuff, I could bop down to the casino and play. And then, I say, everybody gets this, that the worst thing that could happen to me was, what did I do?
I won. Yeah.
I won.
Yeah.
I didn't win $1 million. I won a few $1,000s, but man, if I could have put it into words, then my dopamine dance was doing the salsa. Mm-hmm. I was like, this is amazing. It was a spinny wheel. It was all slots. I was all slot player. It was like, what was I, spin the wheel kind of thing. I had never felt so high in my life. I had taken some drugs when I was young, like cocaine, was sort of similar to that high. Luckily, I didn't get hooked on cocaine. I was smart for once. And I'd never felt that high before. And then, then I went back to Massachusetts, and it slowly started to spiral.
So
Online gambling and a little bit of online slot playing, which was still around then. Then it disappeared. I can't remember why. And then my real tipping point was July of 2006 when I made my first trip to Foxwoods, which is a local casino. And then that was it. Then within 6 months, I had spent $300,000.
mm,
Yeah. So when I go 3 packs
that
a day, lots of drinking. When I go hard.
well that was my next question. Was I read that you said within 6 months you went from quarter slots to $100 slots,
Right.
$200 a pull.
Yeah.
Oh, why?
Why?
I mean, yeah.
Why? Because when I train clinicians, we do a lot of trainings for clinicians at the Mass Council. I say we all know about tolerance. So I will give the example of when I quit drinking in 1992. I didn't quit drinking when I was at a 1. I was already at a 7 in terms of my addictive behavior, my capacity for risk and harm. So when I started gambling, I started at that same level. I didn't start at 1. So it
Right.
did not take me very long. And I also thought in my convoluted brain that the greater the risk, the greater the reward, which was true. But really, it was the rush. I mean, if they had $500 slot machines, which they didn't, I think they might now, but they didn't then, I would have done that because I wanted the biggest rush I could get at them and to stay in that happy bubble for as long as possible.
And I mean, you don't have to answer, but where'd you get the money? Like, what
Yeah.
did you borrow, or was it just your life's work and you just drained it?
Well, it was all that. One, everybody knows, or I think they know that gambling, we call it the hidden addiction,
Hmm.
addiction in the shadows. It is so easy to hide. So I deceived everybody in my life. I was the financial person in the household. So I racked up all the credit cards. I maxed out the home equity line. I borrowed money from my, God, she was 80 something year old mother saying it was to pay off the home equity line. Um, and then the casinos gave me credit line. And they say, how are you going to pay this money with your salary? I'm like, oh, I have a trust fund. They never asked for proof that I had a trust fund. I didn't have a trust fund. And then when someone is addicted to a substance, and for my case, I always say that gambling, you're addicted to money. It could be something of value, but let's just say money. Money was a drug. Gambling's how I got high. When someone who lacks their substance, in this case, money, what do? They'll do anything to get that substance. Anybody who knows, you all know what I'm talking about. And so, I'm still ashamed and sorry to say that when my legitimate sources of money ran out, I began to steal from my employer.
What was a typical, like, were you taking advantage of all, were you getting the free rooms? Were you doing the comps? Because in my story, I say I was just as addicted to that. Right.
Mhm.
And so that's the first question. And then the second question is, you mentioned that, the loss of joy. Did you ever talk to your partner about that? So I guess let's answer that question first. Like, did you ever have a conversation with your partner about how you felt?
I don't remember.
Hmm.
I think it was just a very stressful decade for both of
Yeah.
us. Um, and probably not. Probably not.
Yeah.
Adam, I'm much more articulate and aware of what's happening inside of me now than I was 20 years ago. I mean,
Sure.
recovery has given me great insight as well as a great life. One of the many gifts is being able to be honest with my feelings and really know what was going on for me. But I couldn't articulate any of that then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so were you able to? tell anybody about that? I know you said you mentioned it to someone at work, but like anyone else, did anyone else know that you were actually, suffering? Like you were kind of lost looking for something? Talk to
I
your,
don't think so. I don't
yeah,
think
no.
so. I
And
mean, it
that's
probably someone might have thought, gee, Jody seems a little checked out lately, but
right.
I was, you know, I'm an upbeat, optimistic person, and yeah, yeah, I don't think anybody would have noticed. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe I took a few more mental health sick days and was sort of semi-depressed, meaning like I just needed a day at home. But no, I never really. I don't think people noticed that much.
Mm. And so what were the perks like when you were in it and you were, I'm sure those wampum cards were you must have been the
Oh yeah,
seven
I was
star
a
or
high
whatever
and
it
low.
was.
Yeah,
And so
yeah.
what was that like? Like talk about just how, not to pick on the operators, but it's no secret that the more we bet, the more they try to give us to entice us to come. So
Hmm.
talk about
Hmm.
that a little bit.
Yeah, well, you're right. I mean, one of the differences between other types of gambling, like online stuff that's happening more nowadays, and brick and mortar casino gambling, are the comps that you get. And no other substance gives you those comps. You don't get your electric bill paid when you walk into a bar. I mean, these things don't happen. But you can always win money at the casino. And yeah, I got these sweets, room service. I would get my little rewards point and buy stuff at the store there. And it was, God, it was so crazy because here I was gambling away my family's future and buying an Xbox for my kid. I mean, addiction makes no sense. There's no rationalization to it. We all know that. And I was really not in the right frame of mind to make any good decisions, and I was making a lot of bad ones. But the comps are very much a draw. And I remember learning in GA how surprised I was that one of the characteristics of a gambler is uh, arrogance, and sort of grandiosity. And I never thought of myself as arrogant, but I was a little bit arrogant. I'd walk into the lobby and go right to the VIP section and get my
Mm-hmm.
comp, and it felt damn good.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a side of me I had no idea existed. Ego. I didn't really think I had much of an ego. Gambling really, I have to say, gambling brought out every single of my worst traits. Every single of them. Every single one of them was brought out through gambling. I'm so glad it was for a short period of time.
Well,
But
and
yeah,
I was gonna say, so you started late at 50, and by the time you ended up stealing from your employer, it had only been a couple of years that you were gambling, right?
in a couple of years. Yeah.
So in 2 years you lost 300,000.
Yeah, probably more. I don't know. That was the one win-loss statement that I remember in those 6 months.
And
I was desperate.
who was were you so it sounds like you were gambling out loud. You weren't in isolation, you weren't hiding it. You were hiding the money, but like was your partner coming with you to the casino? Were you going to the casino with friends or was it always by yourself?
Mostly by myself. Mostly
But
by myself. Yeah,
but she knew where you were.
not always.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
What's one of our biggest traits? I mean, we lie, we
Oh yeah.
steal, we're dishonest. I mean, dishonesty, I think, is the thing that brings those of us struggling with gambling down the most, because we're dishonest with ourselves as well as
Mm.
everyone else in our lives, and then sometimes in other more criminal or lots of people at GA say I should have been in prison, but I didn't because I stole from my son's college fund. But we all have this unethical behavior.
Mm.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, so you get to that point where you exhaust all your resources, you start committing illegal acts. Yeah, take us through that. What happened, and take us through take us through like that initial idea in your head of like, well, I could do this. Like how did that go?
Well, let me just say that for the record that so I started at 50, and as I said, women often have a late onset, and I'll tell you my joke that I always say it was a midlife crisis. And I've been saying that for years, but my mom did just live to 101, so I could
Ooh.
live to 100. So I say 50 was my midlife crisis. And I guess because I had dealt with addiction before, it did spiral pretty quickly. As you can see, it spiraled really quickly. And then by two years later, I had dug myself in such a hole um, that I was in the desperation stage. There's this model of the winning, the losing, and the desperation stage. And desperation stage is hopelessness. And I didn't know what to do. I was under the cognitive distortion, the stinking thinking that many of us were under, that I will win it back. I will somehow, if I keep gambling, I will win enough to pay back my employer, to pay back my home finances. What I didn't realize was that it was the gambling that I wanted to do, that it wasn't about the money. The gambling never, ultimately, for people like us, has to do with money. It has to do with a high. And I didn't understand that then. So I felt like I needed to pay it back. But of course, I would take the money and gamble and win some, mostly lose, and keep gambling. And that went on for several months. And then fortunately for me, I was found out and fired. It was the worst day of my life at that point in November of 2007, but it was the best thing that could have happened to me. I was totally in the wrong. I was definitely doing criminal acts, and I deserved everything that I got. And, then the next 18 months, as the justice system moves very slowly, were really difficult, as you can imagine. A lot of publicity, a lot of people who just couldn't believe it, trust destroyed, relationships destroyed. I lost a lot. And it was really, really hard. And of course, I didn't know the end. I didn't know I'd end up sitting here with you 20 years later. But I knew I had to do something. And so as the wheels of the criminal justice system rolled, first I started to go to AA. This is how messed up I was. I immediately after I got fired, minister came over. Everybody knew now. Everything was out there. I started going to AA. And they do raffles in AA. And finally, someone in AA said, I get that you're here for your drinking, but you're talking about gambling. You really should go to GA. And of course, I knew this person was right. I didn't want to go to GA. I didn't want to quit gambling completely. I was still gambling after I was fired. Not for long and not much because I didn't have any money, but, I was still gambling. I couldn't quite quit. And then I was on my way back from somewhere, June 1st, 2008. And I went to Foxwoods and I gambled and I came out with $1,500. And I'm like, that's it. I remember saying to myself, I came out a winner. I won that day. Right.
Right.
And then I stopped. That was like with cigarettes and with drinking. I just knew that this was the moment that I was stopping. And the next day I went to my first GA meeting. So June 2nd, 2008, and haven't gambled since. And so I was really lucky to have found GA.
Mm. And so because I know you were you were found guilty and you did prison time.
Yeah. So in 2008, I went to my first GA meeting. So and it really resonated with me. Like I walked in. You talked about being courageous about that article. Still to this day, the bravest thing I have ever done in my life is walk down the steps of that church to my first GA meeting. I was terrified. I was a wreck. They'd have to throw the Kleenex box at me once they got to know me. I could hardly talk. I was crying. But I met at that meeting, there were two other people there who had gone through a similar story to mine and were on the other side. So I found hope immediately. And then it was really fortunate for me because a year later, in June 2009, I was sentenced to 2 years to 2 and a day at the local state prison. And, at 54 years old, there I was hanging out in a prison yard. And I was in recovery from everything, though. And that helped a lot. And I'm also a unapologetic, indestructible optimist. So, I didn't know how it was all going to end up, but, going to prison was not great, but I always said that once I was sentenced and there, it was the beginning of the end. Like all the waiting between being fired and everything coming out, it was like, finally, okay, I finally know what I'm doing. I hate it. It's really hard, but, I'll be out. And I served between good time. I didn't have probation didn't parole, but I served 20 months, 602 days.
Wow.
Yeah. It was not a fun time.
Yeah. So going back real quick.
Yeah.
So when all of this is going down, when it becomes public, what was the fallout with your friends and family?
Well, my career was shot, obviously, but I think because it helped that I took immediate responsibility and said, yep, I did this, what can I say? I'm sorry. I took total responsibility, tried to make amends by being good in other areas. So my family was still there for me.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't happy with me. They certainly weren't, supportive of anything I had done, but they knew that I was working on recovery and that I was trying my best to move forward. And I think accepting responsibility for your actions and then working the best way you can to show yourself that you are worthy of trust and love every day helped.
For sure. And so you're in prison, you get through it, you come out on the other side. What are the first few months out of prison like? Like what's your plan?
Yeah. Well, I lost a lot when I was away. Our house had gotten foreclosed on. But my wife at the time had found a place that she was living with our son. So I went home to them and then we found another place. I started walking dogs. I worked a little bit at my pre-release job, which was at a bagel place. I worked there my last few months in prison. I worked there and then I worked a little bit after there. I would walk dogs. Then I got a job at a local inn here and worked in the gift shop. Somebody from AA, I know he must have been from AA, knew my record because I had to say it, gave me a second chance. I mean, for those of us who need second chances, when they are given, they are a gift. If that guy hadn't given me that job in the gift shop, and it was like minimum wage, but I wasn't working in food service, which I hated. I was much better in a gift shop and then behind the front desk of this inn and, sort of started. And then I started hounding Marlene Warner at the Mass Council. And I started calling her, I don't know, over a few months. And it took several months for me to have a sit down meeting with her. And she knows this story really well because I'm always very grateful for her. She met me in a town midway between where she lives and I lived on her day off with her little boy in April of 2012. And I told her my story. I had a whole little packet prepared, the speech I'd given in California, and I brought a little car for her son because, you always bring a gift for the kid. And from that day on, I started doing volunteer work for the council. I sat on some panels, went to a symposium, and then I started doing some calls for them. And then wonders of wonders, really, September 2012, they hired me as a program specialist. That's what I was called at the time. I worked the helpline and just sort of merged, into training clinicians as I learned more and more. I visited treatment centers. So really my new life in September 2012 was a really good month because I got affordable housing in the town I lived in because my wife and I had divorced. So I was able to, and she had left the town. So I was able to find affordable housing so my kid could stay in public schools. And I got this job at the council. I mean, 2 freaking miracles in 1 month. It's like right now, September. So my new life really began just 13 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Miracle.
So as someone who is, 3 years and 7 months into recovery and been doing the podcast for almost a year now, you know, I struggle with not only I struggle with like balance, but I also struggle with not substituting the podcast and everything I do that's not actually my recovery, substituting it for my own recovery, right? Like
Mm.
even though I feel like I'm talking about recovery 24/7, I still need to take care of me. I still need to go to meetings. I still need to talk to my sponsor. How do you balance that with, being in the position you're in now and doing everything that you do? Do you still find time to, take care of yourself with your own recovery?
I think so. I mean, I've been practicing for a while, and yeah, I mean, it doesn't take much for me to take care of myself. Just sitting in my backyard watching the birds,
Mm,
that's as rejuvenating as anything. I told you after this, I'm going to go take a beautiful day here on a bike ride. And in the early days of my work with the council, I was triggered every day, like every
mm,
day. Still, the sound of a slot machine makes me go, ooh. But I just practiced, talking through it, and I would talk to people on the helpline and give them the best advice and resources, not advice, really just resources, because that's what it was, is a referral line, and try to help them. But they would also remind me a little bit, like where they were is where I was so ever many years ago, and just to be grateful for being free of it. There's just I remember when I was in prison, I was walking this track, and for the first time in my life, even though I was sort of behind bars, so to speak, I felt free
mm.
because I had no more secrets. I had no more, not like I didn't have a desire to drink and gamble, or smoke, but it wasn't there anymore. I felt this incredible freedom, and I don't take that for granted. But I think I just sort of that and my optimistic nature, like, well, I don't know where I'm going or how I'm going to get there, but I'm going to get there. And
Yeah.
that just sustains me through times that are harder. Yeah,
So you mentioned in the earlier days you have triggers. Do you have any triggers now for any of the substances?
not really,
And,
not
and what do you
really.
and what do you attribute that to? Just time? Just
Time,
yeah.
time, practice, one day at a time stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I just, I feel like the gift I was given by working at the council, when I was fired from this 30-year career, I never thought I'd find purposeful work again.
Mm,
When I got out, I was enrolled, thanks to the state, in a alcohol counseling program or addiction counseling program at UMass Boston. And I thought, well, the best thing for me to do, having a master's in administration and counseling, is to go into counseling. But I didn't really want to go into alcohol and drug counseling, but I didn't know about gambling. And so, I was trained to do that. I never thought I would have the work that I have now. Literally being able to talk about the addiction, the disorder that brought me to that place in such a short amount of time, at such an older age, is just a gift. I keep saying, but it's true. I mean, we're really fortunate to be able to work in this field. And
mm.
of course, it has changed, like you said, so much in the last 13 years I've been in it.
Oh my God. Yeah. Um, so, you know, Odessa mentioned it, you mentioned it, the hidden addiction, right? Like, not only do people around us not realize what's going on when we're actively in addiction with gambling, but I feel like the more I think about my own recovery, the more I talk to people, I feel like it takes a while for us to admit it, for us to realize it. And that comes to my question of what, in your opinion, are the reasons that people are so, I asked Odessa like about treatment. She's like, well, first of all, people need to come to treatment. They're not coming to treatment, right? They're not admitting it. They're not coming in. Do you think that is a combination of the stigma? Do you think it's that they just don't even realize they have a problem? What is it about gambling that people aren't seeking help sooner?
Well, for one thing, it's legal if you're 21. It's everywhere, even more so now. It's normalized as a part of society. I always joke when I'm doing my trainings that gambling is the second oldest profession because it's been around since the Stone Age. I mean, it's in risk is part of being human. Like
Yeah.
every day you wake up, you don't know if you're going to make it through that day. We don't think about it every day, but we could die at any point in our lives. So we take risks, and gambling is all about risk. It's risking something of value when you're not sure you're going to win. That's gambling. And I think if someone feels like they're having gambling harm in their life because it's so well accepted, especially now with the sports betting on. I mean, I watch women's basketball, I watch football. I usually record everything so I can fast forward through all the betting commercials. But other people are out there, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of young men in particular. Everybody, but a lot of young men are being sucked in by this because it's so normalized. Like, why not? What's the harm? What's the harm? Well, there's no harm if you place a $5 bet once a week. But if it starts spiraling out of control, there is harm. And, so that's why I think it's more of a draw than ever because it's everywhere. And it's so compelling. I mean, who didn't used to, McDonald's would have scratch tickets,
The Monopoly thing.
Stop and Shop. Yeah. Monopoly. And
Yeah.
we used to get Publishers Clearinghouse, and who doesn't have a little dopamine hit when they scratch off that little gray box, whatever. It just feeds that part of our brain that makes us feel good, and we want to feel good. And I think without people knowing the science and knowing everything, and then again for the treatment part, not only stigma, but lack of knowing where to find treatment or where to find help for if you are struggling.
Well, that's a perfect segue to my next question is, all right, so I am John Smith. I am 25 years old. I have just come to my rock bottom. I've lost everything. My wife's about to leave me. I need help. I have zero insurance. I see something for the Mass Council on Gaming and Health. I call you guys. What are the different, take me through the Mass Council. Like, how does it work? And if I'm that person, if I'm John Smith, I hit my rock bottom, what are my options?
Well, I will say that the council's been around since 1983, been around for a long time, doing this work when no one else was. And, the landscape has changed. The company has changed. There wasn't even an Office of Problem Gambling in Massachusetts until like 2014 or 2015. So if someone calls a 1-800-GAMBLER and they get us, they'll talk to a helpline specialist and sort of figure out where they're at. Now, if they're an online sports bettor, casino bettor, they'll recommend voluntary self-exclusion, which if people don't know about that, it's basically a way to sign yourself out from the sports betting apps, from brick and mortar and online casinos. I always say it's equivalent to not going down the street that your favorite bar, just avoiding the street that your favorite bar was on. You're locked out. It's through the Mass Gaming Commission. You can contract for a year, 3 years, or 5 years. A lot of people just do it for a year, and you cannot gamble. So that's a really good recovery support, harm reduction. You don't have to do it forever. You don't have to make your decision today that I'm never going to gamble again, because that's really hard words to say, but I'm not going to gamble on sports or in a casino for a year. And then they would talk about self-help supports, of which, like I said, in 2008, there was GA. That was it. Now there's podcast galore. There's you, there's Christina, there's Hatch, there's also Rob Minnick and his YouTube videos. There's so many places people can go. So there are many pathways to recovery. A lot of people don't like 12-step stuff. Fine. There's Facebook, there's podcasts, there's books, there's all sorts of self-help supports out there. There's Smart Recovery, which isn't gambling specific, but if you don't like the 12-step higher power thing, you can go there if you have something else going on as well, because it's for all issues in somebody's life. There are more people out there, like you said, in there weren't that many people out there unless I ran into them at a GA meeting who I could. And the thing I loved about the GA meeting the most was the stories.
Mm.
I mean, I
Yeah.
like the 12-step stuff too, but I really like the speakers and hearing other people talk, because then I knew that I wasn't alone in my behaviors, in the way I thought, that these cognitive distortions, like next time I'm going to win, next time I'm going to win, all these things we say ourselves. And now between YouTube and other social media stuff, you probably know them more than I do. There's a ton out there. And then there is treatment. In Massachusetts, you can call the Massachusetts helpline, and they can refer you to an outpatient treatment center. And the one they would refer you to, the contract with the state is that they can see somebody regardless of insurance. And if
Wow.
you have insurance, they'll take it, obviously.
Hmm.
But these specific outpatient treatment centers will see someone struggling with gambling without insurance. And
Okay.
they're hard to find, but the HRIA helpline for gamblers is the line to call for the treatment stuff. I mean, I wish Massachusetts had more. We don't have a residential treatment center specific to gambling, but we're getting there.
I mean, being around since 1983, that's pretty amazing. So in 1983, it was the Mass Council on Compulsive Gambling.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean,
Yeah.
that's amazing.
Yeah.
You
It
know,
was founded by a gambler, a guy named Tom Cummings.
wow.
And he was a gambler in recovery, and he looked
Shout out
and
to
he said, well,
Tom.
there's GA and there's nothing else.
Right. Yeah.
So,
Wow.
yeah.
Now, you mentioned GA, and I gotta ask, because, GA saved my life. You're a GA person.
Mm-hmm.
You say that a lot of people don't like GA. Would you
Mm-hmm.
say a lot of people don't like it because they just don't give it enough? They don't give it a chance, or they don't find that right meeting? Because there's plenty of GA meetings that are bad. I will say that,
Mm-hmm.
or that don't connect with certain people. But like, I feel like I go back and forth. I go back and forth with GA, but I feel like all the people that I talk to that have years of recovery, years of good recovery, they all went to GA at some point. So I feel like we shouldn't be giving up on GA, especially with these young people. What do you think?
Oh, no. Well, I've heard a lot of things, Adam. One more positive thing I've heard is that more young people are starting to go to live GA meetings because of the sports betting.
Mm.
Before, these are things, anecdotes I get from helpline calls. I don't like GA. Why? Because there's nobody there my age. Okay. Or it was only men. Okay. Or they all do horse track betting and I do this betting. Okay. You're ready when you're ready.
Mm.
I was fortunate because I was really ready when I walked into my first GA meeting. And as I said, there were two other people there who had my story, but were on the other side. There were only 3 women in my GA meeting, but that didn't seem to bother me. It also is it takes a lot of guts to go into a live meeting.
For sure.
So what I often will talk to somebody about is, here are your pathways. And you can, if you don't want to jump in and just like we had to do in the old days, just go to a meeting, that was it. You can listen to a podcast. You can sign up for a Facebook group. You can go on to the GA telephone conference. You can go on gamblersinrecovery.com, which is meetings all over the world. So you're going to a meeting in Australia. No one's going to know you if you're worried about that. Then you can go to Recovery Road Online, which is 12-step based, but it's not exactly GA. You can insure, if you're the type of person that wants to inch your way into the cold water, you can. Or you can just dive in by going to a live meeting. I mean, the thing about live meetings, whether they're Smart Recovery, Celebrate Recovery, Gamblers Anonymous, whatever they are, is you meet people.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I went to Recovery Road Online. I went to their first conference they had in person in Cleveland. And it was amazing. These people, mostly they knew each other from online. Now, some who had started it out in the West Coast, knew each other from live GA meetings, and then they started Recovery Road Online. But they were people from all over the country meeting each other for the first time. And it was amazing.
Mm.
So you do. When I talk to people who call the helpline, especially if it's a loved one, say, I'm worried about my son gambling. I really want him to stop. It's like, well, I can give you all the resources in the world, but if his stage of change is not in the action stage where he's ready, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. We can't make anybody. So many times I wish I could have downloaded what I know into somebody's brain, and so they could get those little light bulbs going off, or that, there's a tipping point when, I always say, if you are ever, people don't even drive standard cars anymore, but when you drove a standard car, you had a clutch, right? And you're learning, you're stalling, you're bucking. Then all of a sudden you got it. You got the balance. And there you are. Your car's in first gear, second gear, third gear. You're riding the bike upright. That's the moment when recovery happens. That's when you're ready, when you're balanced and you're sailing forward. That's sort of the way I put it.
Love that. So a lot of people who work in the space, when I ask this question, they always pretty much answer the same way. And I think most of them probably don't appreciate the question. But as someone who gambled for 20 years, this is a question that I would have asked if I had an opportunity. So I'm going to ask you, see if I get a different answer. In all of your years working for the council, you've talked to God knows how many people, heard how many different phone calls. Is there something that works better than others? Is there a path that, if from everyone that you've talked to, is there a path that is the most successful? Because as someone who is an addict, right, or as someone who is struggling, I would want to know the odds. If this path has seen the most success, I'm going to try that path first. Now, I understand that if that path isn't for me, it's not going to work, right? But I still would want to know. So yeah, is there anything that jumps out at you that, we have seen the most success probably doing this?
Well, I'm probably going to say no, because you also often after a helpline call, you never hear from them again, so you don't really know where they ended up.
Right.
I do know that voluntary self-exclusion is a really good start on a pathway to success. Because if you can stop for a year, by the time you've done one, you've realized how much money you saved, and you've had plenty of time to think about it. And maybe you went to a meeting and maybe you didn't, but you weren't gambling, and maybe it doesn't feel so bad. And I think evidence-based says Gamblers Anonymous and other 12-step groups aren't as effective, but I also think it's hard to find people who are going to be in a study. And I think Gamblers Anonymous or Recovery Road Online, some gambling specific program where you hear people's stories, you get daily inspiration, and you keep doing it in conjunction with counseling, at least at the beginning. I mean, the most I went into counseling once I realized what was happening after jail. And if you combine self-help support with treatment and with the true desire to change, that's the key again, then you have a very successful pathway. And, I do say to folks, if you go to a GA meeting in X town, because you don't want to go to the one in your town, go to the one, and if you don't like it, go to another meeting. And if you still don't like it, then go to that same meeting twice. And then if you still don't like GA, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Go to another GA meeting, or go to an online meeting on Recovery Road or something like that. And try these multiple pathways until you find the pathway that's right for you. Gambling is a very complicated disorder, and we're complicated people. So to find a pathway that works for everyone is impossible. GA has been around longest, and if more young people are going there, if it's getting more diverse, because it's often not very diverse, then that can be a really good pathway because it's free. It's not treatment, and it's live. You get to meet people, and you get to develop relationships with people who are trying to get healthy.
Yeah, that's no offense to everyone else, but that's probably the best answer I've gotten so far. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Um, so what do you say to the person like me who I self-excluded back in 2016,
Mm,
but all that led to was more Keno, more scratch tickets, and then I eventually moved away
mm,
because I excluded from Foxes and Mohegan. And I always say in my story, like, I thought something was going to change, but the disease found a way to keep going. Do you
mm.
often get do you get those stories on your end sometimes of people that self-excluded, but then they just find other ways to gamble?
Sure. I mean, if I talk to somebody, I say, well, it's called voluntary self exclusion for a reason.
Mm,
So you're doing it voluntarily, hopefully. That's the most successful way to do it. If you're being pressured to do it, then forget it. You will find other pathways.
mm,
And then you have to sort of determine, is it like I was just a casino gambler. So, I sort of quit before self exclusion became a thing. But uh, I wouldn't have done scratch tickets because I wasn't a scratch ticket person. I was very one way.
mm.
And it really is all about the stages of change, which I'm sure you've talked about in your podcast at some point. There's a pre-contemplation. We have no idea that what we're doing may be harmful. We don't even think we have a drinking or a gambling problem. And then someone says, Adam, you're really intense about this game. Don't worry about it if they win or lose. Well, you got money on the game. Well, okay. Then you think, maybe people are starting to notice, maybe I do have a little issue. And then there's preparation, maybe voluntary self-exclusion, maybe listening to a few podcasts, and then there's action. You really cannot go into true recovery if you're not in the action stage. And
Mm.
then there's also the people who seem to be able to do a harm reduction approach. That was not me. I'm all or nothing. But I don't dismiss harm reduction. Maybe they never go to a casino or bet on sports again, but they can buy a lottery ticket once a week. Okay, that's
Yeah.
fine. As long as it's not causing negative consequences in your life. Gambling itself is not bad. It's like having a drink every once in a while is. Did I answer your question?
Absolutely.
I get
Absolutely.
on a roll and I forget.
Oh no, I love it. So my last question, I've taken up way too much of your time. If you could wave a magic wand,
Hmm.
and if you had unlimited funds, if you had, more research, what would be the next steps, not just on the state level, but like on a national level, on an international level? What are the things that you would like to see moving forward, both in prevention, education, treatment, in order for us to, you know, start racking up some more wins? And honestly, finding a way to fight back against this monster right now that is
Hmm.
advertising for gambling.
Hmm. Well, you say that when I did that article in 2015, there weren't that many voices out there. But as you know, you're on our lived experience advisory panel, which is one of the programs through the Mass Council, which is comprised of 30 people, including me, with specific lived gambling experience. This is crazy unique. And we are this think tank. I call us a think tank of anybody can come to us and say, what do you guys think about this? Your lived experience. And I also have been making the joke that all of a sudden lived experience is really popular. Like people want to hear from us. They want to know. It's like, yay. And that is becoming nationwide. You can just see it with the podcast, folks out, Kitty and Brian in Oregon and Christina, and there's people all over the country who are promoting lived experience. Recovery coaching as a thing for those with substance use is growing and growing and growing. So the substance use field is getting people who have lived experience in the trenches working with people. And the thing about lived experience is if you're talking to someone who's in the contemplation stage, right? They're thinking they've called, maybe they have a problem. And you say, well, you don't have to go into your story, but you can say, yeah, I was a gambler, I was a stop and team player, yeah. And all this talk that has to happen with anyone else is like, gone. You have instant credibility.
Mm.
And people really appreciate that. And you can't kid a kidder. We know a phony. We know when someone's faking it. It's just this radar that you have.
Mm.
And they know. And if someone is struggling and they're listening with someone with lived experience who is authentic, not trying to sell them anything, many pathways, harm reduction, meet them where they're at, all those words, then that will be a wave of change across the country. So the greater the voice of lived experience, the more that councils like ours can start finding people. It's not easy. It's not easy. And start talking about lived experience, the better. And I think that will be, we're maybe the David to the Goliath at this point, but you know who won, you know. So
Ooh,
there
I
you
love
go.
that. What a way to end it. Oh my God. Oh, you just got me fired up. That was a locker room speech. Oh, Jody, thank you so much. I mean, what a story. What an inspiring. I mean, look at you now. I mean, 17
Amazing.
years ago you were sitting in jail, and now you're a leader in the field, and you're inspiring everybody with your story. It's just such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Adam. Thanks for asking me. Anytime.
Of course. All right. Thank you, Jody, so much. And we will be right back.